promptly at 4 o'clock.
Perfect.
This flag is not mine. It's a piece of property that the Confederate veterans own.
Okay, I have 4 o'clock here, so we'll call to order the January 19th, 2022 regular meeting of the Aspen Pitkin County Housing Authority Board of Directors. Cindy, please call the roll. Cindy, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Rachel Richards.
Here.
Francie Jacober.
Here.
Carson Schmitz.
Here.
Allison Bektish.
Here.
So let's see, John Ward and Skippy will be joining in a little bit. I'm also unsure about David, but we do have a quorum, so we're all set.
Very good, thank you. Okay, so we will move to public comment. So I know we've got a couple of speakers lined up for public comment. When it is your turn for public comment, please identify yourself, first and last name, and please keep your comments to 3 minutes in order for to allow all speakers a chance to speak. So, Cindy, who do we have that's for public comment today?
Well, I know that Peg O'Brien did let us know, but it's a possibility there's a few other people that want to too. So you might,
Okay.
I do see quite a few people that are from Woody Creek. I don't know if they're all making comments, but yes. Okay.
Great. Okay. Well, Peg, we'll just start with you, and you've got 3 minutes. Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, Carson. Thanks for this chance to address the Board of Directors at this meeting. Just a note for those of you following, just that the last meeting, some of the public comment was cut from the YouTube version that was found on the APCHA site. For the first week, I worked hard to clarify that and get that replaced by a different recording through GrassRoots. And then today, and just as far as public accessibility, it is kind of hard to find this meeting for people who don't come all the time. I've been scouring the papers, and the APCHA staff, I did call finally, and the calendar is in the agenda center, in the BOD page, et cetera, et cetera. So since I was there, I looked at, and this agenda wasn't posted until late Monday. So that's just different than most government entity transparency scheduling things I'm used to. But while I was there, I looked at this agenda, and I don't see the pilot project, which is in a way a relief, but it is easy to see that it's likely the devaluation work on the targeted Woody Creek properties will be drawn back into the office to be performed one by one at time of sale, as it always has been. But there in the packet is an approval resolution to complete the full subsidy of a special assessment for a water line into a condo in Aspen, bringing APCHA's contribution to this one, for this one expense to this one-bedroom home to more than $11,000. As you are considering this item, please take a moment to ponder that in Woody Creek, all of us paid and pay for all of our own water lines to the homes from the main line. And we, and only we, collectively bought and paid for the main lines under the streets and the water treatment and sewer plants, et cetera, including a special assessment on overruns running about $10,000 each. So it's kind of similar to this proposal you guys have. And all of our things that we've paid for serve our 58 homes. housing more than 230 people. No subsidies on this. To wrap this up, know that for us, the cost burden is one hit. The cut in value at time of sale is another. Here, homeowners with the least resources, when it comes time to sell their properties, do not get back what they put in. So just keep in mind, when it is referred to that it is due to the state of the home or what the market could bear at the time, know that the only thing that impedes robust sales prices in Woody Creek is being under APCHA. Thanks.
Thank you, Peg. Okay, so who is, is there anyone else that's here for public comment? If so, please unmute yourself, state your first and last name, and please keep your comments to 3 minutes. Anyone else with public comments? Going once. All right, hearing none, we will move into the executive director's comments. Matthew, go ahead.
Excuse me. Good afternoon, everybody. My one point, actually, I have a couple points. I just want to preview next board meeting. I'm going to show our communications plan and strategy, update that so everybody in the board can have a look at that. We're really excited to be revamping our outreach to the community to make sure everybody knows what's going on, and also have interactive facilities so that it isn't just people who get through to APCHA staff on the phone who can get a good response. We have not forgotten Francie and Skippy's kind offer to go out to Woody Creek to discuss with the residents there the proposed pilot program and hear their feedback. We're working on a few things on our end, just on factual basis, but we are going to move ahead with that. So I know that was mentioned in the last meeting. I just want to assure everybody that is going to happen. And then the other thing I just wanted to mention is, I'm not sure if it's up yet, but APCHA is hiring. We will be looking for a maintenance tech. I don't think that's quite up yet, but I just wanted to mention that. Diane, did you have anything to mention that I missed?
And thank you, Matthew, for mentioning hiring. I will just mention that I'm working with, the city has hired a new assistant to the city manager. Her name's Angie Sprang, and she is working with me on doing the recruitment for the housing policy analyst. Thanks.
Okay.
I just wanted to make just a couple of quick updates that we may have a 1-bedroom coming on the market for sale for next week. It's not, I don't know for 100% sure, but again, just a reminder to sign up for those news releases and stuff on our website so that you get them. We also did today have a bid period end for 4 units. So we'll be holding a lottery on Monday for 4 units. And right now we don't have any rental units that will be coming up next week. So I just wanted to let everybody know that as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Cindy. Okay, so next item on the agenda is the consent calendar. So these can be either adopted as one motion or individually if there's any discussion needed on either of these. Would anyone like to make a motion or to discuss them individually? Allison?
I have one question based on the public comment. So I don't know if I need to first vote to peel these apart or if I can just ask the question.
I think we'll just do them. How about we just do this? We will, let's do the minutes of the January 5th, 2022 regular meeting. Take a motion to approve those.
So moved.
Motion from Rachel, second from Francie, and it's a roll call vote because we're on Zoom.
Okay. Rachel?
Yes.
Francie?
Yes.
Carson?
Yes.
Allison?
Approve.
Thank you.
Okay, and so that brings up the approval of Resolution 1, Series 2022, approving an additional $965 for a special assessment. Does somebody from staff want to maybe just give us Cindy, give us a quick preview on that, and then maybe that'll address Allison's question. If not, we can discuss.
Okay. This, and actually you approved a special assessment last year of $10,000. This is only close to about $1,000 over that. This is again a very old project that we own one studio unit in, and it was built around the late 1960s, and they just needed some major work done on the sewer line system, and it did cost just a little bit more than what they thought. So that's what this additional amount is for.
Okay.
Question, Carson?
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Rachel.
Is there any plan to recoup that money that was necessary to keep those units functional and safe when they go to resale?
We're not reselling it. We're keeping it as a rental unit. It's in a free market complex. We've got one deed restricted unit in a free market complex. We're keeping it as a rental unit. So we will be, we did have a tenant in there, one of our employees, because of some issues that came up, we will be looking for another renter on that. So we will be having some rental revenue coming in to subsidize some of the costs that we will be having on that unit.
Okay, I think that's an important clarification, that this is not someone's for sale unit and it's not going to be resold to someone else. It's going to remain in the rental pool. Is that
correct?
Accurate?
That is accurate.
Thank you.
Tom, you're on mute.
One of the rules that's been in the program forever on rental housing is that with respect to the rental prices, owners are not allowed to add things like special assessments that owners have to pay because they're a member of the homeowners association. So the APCHA's, the understanding that APCHA is not going to add rent to the rent amounts to the monthly rent on this unit is consistent with what we do with all other owners of rental housing.
Which we would not do that. All we plan on doing is just charging the normal rent for what the category of the person is going to be. That's what the rental amount will be when we put another qualified employee in there.
So while this is a subsidy for the unit, it's not a subsidy that it goes into the pocket of the tenant or anyone else.
Understood. Thank you, Tom. Allison.
Yeah, I also just wanted to clarify that this is an APCHA owned apartment. So it's not that APCHA spent that money to bail out an HOA and is refusing to do something like that at other HOAs within the system. This is specifically an asset of the office. And so that's, I think, the misunderstanding there.
Okay. Yes, and that's exactly right.
Any other questions or discussion on resolution number 1? If not, I would accept the motion.
So moved.
Motion from Francie.
A second.
Second from Rachel. And roll call vote again.
Okay. Allison?
Approve.
Carson?
Yes.
Rachel?
Yes.
And Francie?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Great. So that gets us into the next item, which is a discussion on entering into an updated deed restriction. And I've got Cindy and Bethany on this one.
Right, and I'll start to take the lead on this. We have had, just to let everybody know, we've had people who've owned for quite a while ask us, especially under older deed restrictions where they had like a flat 10% of capital improvements. They don't have any where if you do energy efficiency items, anything like that, where they can get an additional capital improvements on it. So we've had a lot of people ask us if they can go under a new deed restriction. It is something that we've been thinking about. We still think that there should be some criteria on it. It shouldn't be like if they've just bought and they've done all their 10% capital improvements in the first year, and now they want to go under a new one and get more capital improvements. We think that we want to come back with you. I did list some of the criteria in the memo itself. We think it should be for people who are under an older deed restriction, not who's under a newer deed restriction, and somebody who's probably been under a deed restriction for at least 5 to 10 years. Then this is something that would allow them to do more stuff to their property. Also, if anybody wants to go under a new deed restriction and they do have a different appreciation rate, the appreciation rate would change. It would go with the 3% or CPI, whichever is less. So they would have to make the decision on whether they want to do that. But we think that this is a good thing as long as we have some specific criteria for people who are interested in doing this. Are there any questions from the board?
Do you have any questions for staff, Rachel?
Yeah, one question, Cindy, we had talked about something a little bit similar to this, half a year or so ago. And part of that discussion was that when you went into a new deed restriction, your base would be reset and start at that point that you have the new deed restriction. Is that part of this as well?
That would be part of this as well. Most of the people, especially if you set it at a specific, like at least 10 years, they're more than likely going to have a maximum sales price. It's going to be quite a bit under what the maximum sales price is for that category. So it is something that, we can do numbers. We can look at numbers before we do this. If it's whether 10 years or 15 years, we can look at it as well. Maybe it should be some more longer than the 10-year mark to look at what somebody's maximum prices might be right now. And it could be that we look at it to say their current maximum sales price has to be a certain percentage under the maximum for that category. Maybe that's a way to establish it as well. We're open to any criteria or any additional items that the board might think would enhance this program.
Yeah, no, this is very helpful. I think that it has to be a whole package at some level. If someone's going to go for the potential of more capital improvements to their unit, but at the same time, they're going to go back to their original purchase price 30 years ago and reset their appreciation there, you're not going to get too many takers. So, right. But I do think this continues to be of value and find a way to make it work. I do have one comment, and I don't want to confuse things here too much, but it's a small nuance I've kind of noticed in this system, and I want us all to think about it and try to work our way through it. But basically, what I've gotten a little concerned about is over the life of a unit, if the first owner does their 10% of capital improvements, but then sells before they have fully depreciated out, the remainder of those capital improvements would become part of the permanent base that appreciation is then based on. And if this happened to one unit repeatedly, that, hey, I bought a $200,000 unit, I made 10% capital improvements of $20,000, I left after just 3 years, so those capital improvements only depreciated down from 20 to say 16,000 or 15, but that 15 starts to remain part of the permanent base that will appreciate on that unit from here on out. And then the next owner could do the same thing, and the next owner could do the same thing. So you could be adding a lot of components to the permanent appreciation base that are actually items that we would normally depreciate down to zero. So that if the person who made the same 20,000 of improvements, but sold their place at year 10, they would get zero of it back. And I do understand that the new owner would get some benefit from the undepreciated parts. But again, if you continue it out over the life of the unit, it's quite likely that, you know, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 could be added to the permanent appreciation base of things that we would normally depreciate back down to zero because they were capital improvements. But if people sell before they've finished depreciating out, they become permanent as if they're not depreciating elements of that house anymore. So again, the person could buy it in year 30 or 35 and it's flipped 5, 6 times, and they're paying on their base price for items that have now depreciated past their beneficial use, and they may need to replace again, or again, they're just paying for items that have been replaced twice over already in their home. And so I don't know how to deal with it, but when someone sells and their depreciation has not yet occurred on their full 10%, those things just start appreciating as part of a permanent base, as if it was part of a brand new unit. And that's one of our flaws that we have to kind of figure a way out of dealing with. Thank you for listening to that.
I mean, Rachel, do you have any proposed, I mean, because I agree with you, it's a problem, but when I think about how we would solve that, I don't see a readily apparent answer.
You know, I'm not sure I see a readily apparent answer, but I think if we do a little research to identify, is this much of a problem? Do a lot of units flip without any capital improvements ever happening? So I think, again, looking forward to that policy analysis and how to look at it. All I feel like done is identify an inflator that is artificial because it is something that we normally would depreciate down to zero, but we're allowing it to become part of a permanent base that will appreciate in eternity. And we have to think about that. That's all. That's all I know is we have to think about it. Thank you.
Allison.
Thank you. We recently voted to kind of peel out some of those greening elements of capital improvements, that some of those things did allow you to go above and beyond. And I don't know if there's any way to incorporate some of that discussion into this. If we wouldn't, I don't know if they would have to do a whole new deed agreement in order to get in on that measure that we've discussed moving forward. Besides greening up stuff, which I absolutely support and understand, I would love to clarify an example of this problem. So someone updated one of the things that is allowed to be updated and counted towards your sale price later. Now they've lived there so long that they want to do it again. But instead of recouping some of that in this sale, it would just be out of pocket.
Well, I'll jump in there. I mean, I can tell you right now an example of this in my HOA where you've got people who have lived in their units 20, 30 years. They had a 10% capital improvement. They have put their 10% into the property and now are looking at, they want to replace the windows, for example, and it costs, you know, $30,000 or $40,000 to do. And because their deed restrictions are so old, they no longer are, or they're not qualified for that, basically to add that as a capital improvement because it's an energy efficiency thing. So I know there are a number of people in, you know, my own HOA who were interested in, who would be interested in signing a new deed restriction.
I'm just wondering of an example, I guess, of a non-energy efficiency, you know, of a non-green option, because I guess my then proposal for something to look into would be if there's a way to backdate specifically green initiatives.
And I don't know if Tom would comment on this, but for us to allow somebody to do something outside of the deed restriction, if you give them an inch, they'll want everything underneath there. So we really and truly have to adhere to the deed restriction. I think the only way that we could allow that is if somebody goes under a new deed restriction to go for the energy efficient items or for anything else.
Okay. And would this have any negative effect on APCHA if we were able to update their deeds?
No, I don't think it would have any negative effect at all on this. And it could be where the only way that you can do this is if your unit currently meets minimum standards. Not necessarily have an inspection, but we would go and do a site visit and make sure that it is in decent shape. It's because you don't want to really allow somebody to do additional stuff if the unit that they have in is not at least up to possible minimum standards, unless what they want to do will bring them up to those minimum standards.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about a lot of things that could be, if people voluntarily update their deed restrictions, even getting HOA, capital improvement funds added out, maybe your HOA has to be in good standing as well, things like that. So to me, if the public is coming to us saying they want to update deed restrictions when that's been a carrot that's been suggested for so many years, that seems like a good win.
Yeah. I mean, I'm in agreement, and I would say that, the counter to, or the other side, I guess, of the discussion about capital improvements increasing the, the price of the units. I mean, let's not forget that those are improvements to APCHA properties that we don't have to do planning, financing, supervision. We don't have to do anything. It's people who are wanting to update and spend money on their units, and so I'm supportive of this. Skippy, Rachel, any other?
Sorry.
Francie?
No, I don't have anything to add. I think you guys characterized it correctly. Yeah, supportive.
Yeah.
All right.
I'm absolutely supportive. I think we need to continue and investigate. I want to make it something people can add very green things and more efficiency things to their homes. But I do think that most of those end up needing replacement at some time too. And so things that are added to a permanent base as if they're going to be a permanent benefit to that home are different in my mind than things that depreciate over time. And, so in part of this investigation, as we really finalize code, would be to really come up with a few examples from different projects or different age groups, different classes within our program, so we can kind of vet it through with some real life examples. I think will really make a difference. Going through this exercise, I wouldn't want to, let me put it this way. I wouldn't want to be overly generous and say, okay, 30% capital improvements. And I also don't want to short it, and say only 12%, I mean, we have to what really would make some difference here. And one of the things I know I'm dealing with, maybe others as well, I have zero understanding of how much it costs to replace a bathroom now. And I'm watching my neighbors replace their bathroom, and I'm thinking, I can't wait till they're done, and then I'm going to ask them what it costs, and find out what happened. But I've literally thought on some of these units, even when the 10% would renew after everything is depreciated out, how much will 10% get you in terms of repairs and upkeep, and that's a challenge in today's market. So anyhow, more investigation about how it really plays out, and some thinking around this idea of how do we keep depreciating asset components from becoming part of the permanent appreciation base, or how fair is that? That people would be paying for it as if it's brand new, part of the appreciation base, but it's going to deteriorate beyond its useful life within just a few years. And then every future owner continues to pay for that item that's already past its useful life for the next 40, 50 years. And that's a flaw in our system. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. So Cindy, Bethany, any questions there around what you heard as far as this, what to come back with here?
No, I got some really good ideas from the discussion that we have and some really good direction on this as the different criterion. And I'll tell you something, Rachel, I understand where you're getting at when you talk about that. The only thing is how do you allow somebody to do capital improvements, get credit for it, and then the next person has to get the loan for that, but then part of that is going to depreciate down. And how do you keep track of that? Is there a formula out there? Because it's something that we would have to try to figure out and probably try to put on Home Track as well. I understand where you're going with on that, but that is something that it's mind-boggling to me. I don't know how to get there. And if anybody has any ideas about how to get there, please let us know.
Yeah,
Well,
Cindy, I'll just say, I don't know, but I do know it's an issue. And, you know, maybe we think about the unthinkable, but if somebody has assets that will be depreciating, you know, maybe an APCHA buys them to keep the units at a lower price and says, here's your money, but the new buyer isn't going to have to pay for these things that are depreciating. And you know, we've talked already about what do we do when units go above their category? Will we have to buy them down? And this might be an example of how we keep them down while getting them improved, but acknowledging the fundamental flaw that we have to step into. So, you know, maybe that's an idea that we could approach. But you're the one who has all the history and knows how much people really are investing and how many people invest 20,000 and then leave in 2 or 3 years. I mean, there's some statistical analysis about how our units turn over and how they're used and how this 10% is or is not used that I think will help inform the policy further.
And we might be able to try to pull up some of that information. I do know that when you're using the 10% cap, we sold some category 1 homes at Highlands for $40,000. Their 10% cap is $4,000. There's not much you can do for $4,000. And that's their maximum because it's based on the 10% of their sales price. So that's also something that we haven't really delved into either. Should there be just a set amount is something that how do you do that as well? Is it if it's a property that's 15 years old, you allow them a certain amount of capital improvements. And if it's 5 years old, you allow them another one. I guess there's a lot of different ways to look at this. And again, I think trying to find out, I think we can find out how often things turn over, especially some specific units. We might be able to figure that out and bring some of those statistics back to you as well. Because there are people who don't do any capital improvements. And you're right, there are some people who just totally max it out.
Yeah.
So
yeah. No, I mean, you hate to say it, but I've thought about it in terms of my own living unit as you would. And I'm not even sure if my 10% renews when it's depreciated out or not. I've made a number of improvements over the years, but I'm pretty sure they would have depreciated out no matter what. But it's a $64,000 unit. Mine is $6,400. I don't think I could replace the bathroom today for $6,400 or other things. And I've tried to think, well, boy, what if I had done it 3 full times over the course of 30 years? It would only still be $18,000 I could have spent to keep this unit up the way it should be kept up. And it's hard to imagine that would do everything it should do. So I love that your approach you're talking about, Cindy, is really taking that 360-degree view. And maybe there's other housing authorities that have ownership models that have some templates we could take a look at as well. Thank you.
Diane?
Thanks, Carson. Rachel and I actually had a great conversation about this, the structural question before the meeting. And one of my concerns is that what we're asking is, as Rachel just pointed out, a 10% on most of APCHA's properties isn't that much money. More than 70% of current APCHA owners have owned their homes for more than 10 years. So we're taught, right? These things depreciate down. And what I'm concerned about is, and I know, and there are definitely pieces in there that Cindy can do research on and come back with, but the whole of investigating all this and finding out the price of a bathroom, et cetera, that will simply, and I'm being incredibly frank here, that's going to put us in a position where we're not even going to have this information in 6 months. And my concern is that if you think about the bar of, if you were to say, okay, tonight, APCHA still has to advertise this opportunity. Owners have to take advantage of it, and they spend their money and make the improvements. And it's an incredibly high bar as it is. And now we're going to add a research project onto it for which we don't currently have the staff. And Angie is working on this. However, we're not going to have somebody on board for a few months to be a policy person. And when we have that person on board, that is still a significant amount of research. So I'm just trying to add that piece in here of, given that it's about 73% of owners have owned for more than 10 years. I'm just looking at the data that Andrew provided you in October. Is all of that research necessary to answer this question of, can we offer this up and see what happens? Thank you.
Skippy.
Thanks. Yeah, no, Diane, I appreciate that. I wasn't hearing from, Rachel said, I support this, and I think we need to look at this problem as we move forward. So I don't think she's suggesting that we need to hold this up to get it perfect. And certainly I don't think so either. I think we need to get this in the field and get going. We recognize there's a problem, and a couple things are true. We now have home trek in place when we didn't before. So where before it's hard to look back and quantifiably understand some of these things, in the future, it will naturally become easier. Also, I would look less to other rental programs or other ownership programs and other rental programs, because the best person to know what it actually takes to maintain a specific and unchanging standard is a high efficacy rental program. And so maybe we can steal some of those metrics or numbers over time. But for now, the program has the issues it has now. We need to solve them. We need to move this forward quickly, and we will learn a lot in the field as we're mindful of that problem, as Rachel said, and can begin to bring data to it.
Thank you, Allison.
I just want to peel out, Rachel had two good points there. One being that we add the value to the sale price of something that is devaluing over time. And separately, that even with a 10% of capital improvements, a lot of us probably can't keep up our apartment with Roaring Fork Valley repair rates to be as pristine as they should be for the next buyer. So those are two separate issues. My one comment on the appreciation issue is that absolutely logically that makes sense. It is that's been in play for so long, and look how many people are still buying, able to buy, sales units within APCHA. So it's a bummer. I'm dealing with a washing machine from '96 that I don't have the means to replace, and still paid for it right when I bought my place. It's a bummer, but it hasn't put a cog in the system yet. And actually, Diane, from that same data, I think a lot of our ownership prices are low for the mean of the category, is my understanding. So I think there is, right now, we're not pricing people out, which would be my biggest fear of being able to enter our system, because we're doing that sort of illogical appreciation. It's working right now. So I think of those two issues. The second one of how do we incentivize people who can't afford to keep up their place to keep them up, would be a more fun project for you guys to attack.
Yeah, I agree with Allison, and I'll just close it there. It all works really well while interest rates are 2% and 3%. Wait till they're 8% again.
And hopefully not more.
Yeah.
Okay. I think we've got direction on that. So With that, we will
And Carson,
move.
just to clarify, because I think I read it wrong initially. So we're moving forward and doing the analysis.
Well, I think that, I mean, what I heard is move forward on allowing the new deed restrictions, and then I think Rachel's point was just the adding the value to the property as it turns over is something that, you know, we need to put out for a future agenda, something to pay attention to. I mean, I think to Allison's point, if you start looking at that and adding that price, I mean, you know, I guess the devil's advocate, you could say that having the inflated price on a $64,000 unit would make it more, you know, easier to keep up and to put more money in, because 10% of a larger number is a larger number, right? So, you know, I think it's more something that is maybe for a future agenda. Allison's point about the affordability. I mean, that is something that I would say that this should be part of the affordability. If we're going to have the affordability discussion, this should be a part of it, because then you can tie it to something and you can say, okay, well, when the property gets to be X% of the affordability standard, then, you know, whatever we decide to do. But I think it's separate. We need to peel it out from this discussion.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right, great.
So
Okay.
My plan is to really set up some specific criteria and just bring it back to you one more time, if that's okay with the board.
Okay.
Sounds great. And I mean, my personal opinion, if anybody disagrees, let me know. But I mean, I would err on the side of making it easier for people who are under an old deed restriction and want to come under a new one. I think that's something we should be encouraging.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, so then that moves us to our next item, which is lottery chances. And so this is a, so lottery chances, I mean, we'd had some sort of initial discussions. One of the things that as we kind of prepare for our larger, broader discussion on maybe looking at trade downs, one of kind of the ideas that I had been kicking around is perhaps is there some low-hanging fruit, or maybe just an easy solution for us to try, given that I feel that if we've got somebody within our system who is in a 3, 4, 5 bedroom unit and wants to trade down, there's really no, I mean, that I feel like that's something that APCHA should be encouraging. If somebody wants to provide empty bedrooms back and come into a smaller unit, I don't know why we wouldn't incentivize that. And so, you know, one of the potential ways we might do that is lottery chances. And so, you know, Cindy, I don't know if you want to do a presentation on this, or maybe let's start there, and then in the context of kind of that discussion, we can continue afterwards, if that sounds acceptable.
Sure, and Carson, I'm gonna give the presentation on this, unless Cindy wants to. So what we are bringing back to you all is there has been a lot of conversation on looking at lottery chances. Some things that were thrown around during 2021 were what happens if, what would happen if APCHA were to give extra chances based upon the number of times someone has entered the lottery or bid. And so this memo does not, as you've probably read and seen, it doesn't include a super priority or a different priority or chances for a trade down or downsizing or right sizing. I think we can certainly have that conversation, and that might fall better as we start talking about the right sizing conversation or trade downs in the next few meetings. So what we what we've done for you all in this is the first table is a lottery that we ran at some point in the last year. We've removed the names. These were the applicants in that lottery. And the important thing to remember as we talk through these tables is that every time we create a different lottery, or, there is a different lottery, all of these chances will be different. So the percentage of maybe, the change in percentage, either positive or negative, is going to be different based upon who's in that lottery. So the first table talks about what happens if we were to keep our standard chances that we have right now, but to add an additional 2 chances if someone's bid more than 15 times. The 15 time number, I think, was thrown around at one point last summer, but is really just a number picked out of a hat. Staff is not incredibly supportive of this, only in that it's very hard for us to track. What is a bid? How long does those 15, how many, is it a year that they have to do 15 bids in? That wouldn't likely be possible. Is it multiple years? If someone turns down a unit, would we have to reset their bidding, bids of how many we're at? But this would show you that if we were to give someone an additional, 2 additional bids for bidding 15 times or more, it's about a 1 to 2% increase in this specific lottery. So it's not drastic. Again, in this one, it could be, but likely it's a small change in percentage for someone to either be the winner or not. If it's okay with you, Carson, if anyone has any questions about this specific table, I'm happy to answer them. If not, I'll keep going through the memo.
Bethany, do you know who won on each of these? Like, would we know it actually did end up being someone who had the higher chance and has been bidding for a long time or anything like that?
No, Allison, I started making these in about July or August. And to be honest, all of the data has been so removed so many times, I don't know. We've seen it both ways, where sometimes that brand new, it's their first time ever bidding. They've just hit 4 years. They win, even though folks have been in the lottery, with 20 plus years. It's the end of the day, it's a chance. So it's an interesting game. I'm sure with enough digging, we could get at that data, kind of where it is, especially now that we're in home track, but I don't know who won this exact one.
That's fine, thank you.
Of course. With going to table 2, this one does 2 things, provides a change of proposed chances, as well as adding extra chances for more than 15 bids. So it's interesting if you provide 1, 2, 3, and 4 instead of 5, 6, 7, 8, you see a different percentage and chance of winning based upon how many entries are in. My understanding is at some point in the past, we increased the number so that the more than 4 years, less than 8 didn't have 1. They had a few more to give them a few more chances. That was board direction, and Cindy can probably give us more dates on that piece. But we could revert backwards and go back down to 1 to 4. And again, these are just showing our standard categories or groupings of working years. So we could do something like this. That would certainly increase the percentage of winning chance for someone with a longer year quite dramatically. Actually, it's, a 6% increase in this lottery for someone, if there's only one person with more than 16 years, and the person that's in that 4 to 8 year category has a much lower chance of winning. Skippy, I see your hand.
I just had a question. So I remember in the lead up to this, and thank you for putting together all this stuff. It's complicated. But I had heard the critique that people who had lost so many times should have more more chances. I'd heard the critique that people who have been here or worked longer should have a higher chance. But I didn't hear critiques around, the relative chance of winning between a 4 and 8 year person was out of whack. Did we get those and I missed them? And if so, can you just help me understand what we've heard?
I think we have, and I'm sorry, my smoke detector is going off. Cindy, can you
go check something? I guess not. Okay.
Yeah, I apologize. Say that question one more time, Skippy.
I was wondering if we have received critiques or we believe it is a problem, the relative chance of winning between people who, are working 4 years versus 8 years, for instance. Has that been something that we think is wrong?
I think it depends on what I think is when I first started, it was obviously one chance per person. Anybody who had 4 years, you were in a lottery and everybody had the same amount of chances. It changed because people felt that if you've worked here longer, you should have a little bit more of a chance.
Yep.
It was set at 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 because it gave people with a longer work history a little bit of a chance. But as you can see, if it went down to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, those percentages change mathematically. So I also think you have to figure out, are we going towards wanting to provide housing for people who have been here longer, which I think is really important. But those people have also been here for a while. They've been around, they have different resources that they can work at versus somebody who's just been here for 4 years. So you're changing the probability quite a bit. If you allow people with more chances who've been here for more than 20 years, you're also hitting a group that's a little bit older as well. And again, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I'm an old person and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But you're also getting people that are getting closer to retirement age as well. So to me, it just depends on where the board really and truly wants to head with regards to these. I do know that anything major change besides going to maybe the 1, 2, 3, 4 is a huge change in home track, and auditing would have to be done and all that other stuff as well, just to give you a heads up. So there's quite a bit of additional cost versus going to just like the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
And Cindy, not to cut you off, but just to kind of highlight what she said, and I apologize for the disruption, but we're trying to give you multiple different ideas. It's not a first reading or anything like that. It's really a starting point of a conversation to say, what's the board looking for so that we can dive into one specific direction maybe, and then start bringing back 3 or 4 different lotteries so you can see if we did have different groupings of participants, kind of how that would be affected. And Cindy's correct. Any change that's made with a lottery priority system, except if we change kind of chances and keep the exact same groupings, means we've got to go to our developers and then go back to audit. So one of the things I think I wrote in the memo at some point was, if that does happen, that I would recommend we hold off on a little bit just to see if, as Carson talked about in the lead into this segment, was if there is a different priority for downsizing. All of those should go at the same time to our developer, just to make sure we're using our resources most effectively. I don't know if that answered your question, Skippy, or not.
Answered a lot of questions, but not really.
So it's a philosophical question for the board, really.
Well, no, I understand that. My question is specific. It's, do we have a bunch of people complaining currently, or not complaining, I shouldn't say that. Do we have a bunch of people bringing to our attention that there is a significant problem or inequity in the chances of winning of the existing brackets? Not should people later on have more chances that they don't get, but is there something really wrong with the difference between having 4, 8, or 12 years of work history? Are we hearing that? Okay, that's all I'm asking. That's it.
Nope. Sorry. Nope. We answered a lot more questions though.
You answered a lot that's helpful, but that's all I wanted to know.
Francie, I think you were next, and then Allison, and then Rachel.
You're on mute.
This is going to be somewhat uninformed question, but I guess all questions are, and I only know what I know at this point. But so when I look at this, it doesn't seem to solve our problem of people who are moving here to try and take jobs, because you have to live here for 4 years before you're eligible. So it seems one of our biggest problems right now is providing housing for potential employees, especially as our local labor market seems to be thinning out and employers are having a really hard time filling positions. And I know this is probably something I should have learned a year ago when I joined you guys, but and I know that the county does something for county employees, but this is just employees in general. So have you guys ever talked about that, about how we deal with that problem, people who haven't lived here for 4 years and need housing? I know it's an aside right now, but I would just love a little bit of explanation. Thank you so much.
Of course. I think, Francie, it's a great question. People come into our office and wait for that 4-year mark. So excited to finally be able to start bidding. And I think it's a question that at some point has to go back to the board. And I hate to kick it back to you all, but our very much set up for, besides the seasonal housing, set up for those folks that have been here a while and have showed some commitment. 4 years in our ownership. They can certainly bid under 4 years, but they're in the very bottom tier. Our rental housing goes to folks that have the longest work history. So, very, very rarely does it trickle down to a brand new person. I certainly haven't seen that recently happening. But yeah, our housing is very much set up for that kind of more tenured Pitkin County individual and not the person that's moved here right away. I'm not sure when it was, and it might have, I think it was before your tenure on the board, we did talk about looking at changing some of our rental housing so that it wasn't to the longest work history, but that has to be board directed, and whether it should just be kind of more of a, not necessarily a lottery, but go down kind of a list of names based upon who signed up. So those are all interesting comments. And if everyone else is interested, we can certainly bring it back, but I don't know. Cindy?
Just an extension of this, and something I don't know also, is how many people are on our waiting list?
On our wait list?
Yeah, on the list. How many people are trying to bid for these small number of units?
So Cindy can speak to that. We don't keep a wait list for our rental housing. So I can't speak from who's looking to get into rental. Cindy, do you know the number of folks that are bidding right now?
I don't. I do know it has gone down. And the only reason is because we only allow people to bid up one category. So I also have kept track. I have an Excel spreadsheet of everything that we have, how many people we have. I have provided that to the board. I can provide you an updated Excel spreadsheet on that so you can look to see how many people have bid. It also shows how many people are renting deed restricted units, renting free market, own free market, or own deed restricted as well. So I'm more than happy to provide that to you so that you can kind of see. But it is different since we've changed the bid process, that you can only bid up one. So we're not getting quite as many bids as we had in the past, even though we always get more than what the one unit is. So, but it just kind of depends on the property itself.
Okay, thank you.
Allison?
Yes, to make this meeting shorter, my short thing that I should say is just that I support staff's suggestion that we don't look into this at this time, but I do have thoughts about every single thing that someone said. So to make this longer, I'm going to thread the needle and get a comment in here. I think one point we kind of went off, and I'm coming back to these longer, the more chances for the longer you worked and kind of honoring how long people have worked. I just want to clarify that that's not all one circle. You can have worked here for a long time and be in APCHA housing and have won more than one lottery. So it's not exactly that you've never won. you're getting lots of chances, even if you're currently bidding on a home while sitting in a home that you've won. So it's quite different from like, oh, I've bid all the time and I've never won, and so I get extra chances. I've worked here for a long time and I get extra chances. Somehow you found a way to live here, to work here that long, and it might be because you live in APCHA housing. So what are you getting extra credit for at that point? Kind of, unless we're going to trade downs. I think the trade down system or trade system at all might work better as like an exchange on the website and a 1-for-1 where like people who are willing to put it up. I think if you get into the lottery with that and it's based on luck, that's going to be a really difficult way to encourage something we want to be snappy. So we might be able to not even have to deal with that if it's, you know, families looking for upsizing and there's a way to make our own social network. How's that for a task for staff to make some of those matches? I also started thinking when I was reading the memo about that 4-year mark, and I think maybe at some point it made sense to show commitment to the town. At this point, it's absolutely, you're showing survival. You know, I think we have a lot of people coming in here mid-career, not ski bumming. They're trying to work for as Francine said, our local businesses, and they don't need to prove anything. They came here on purpose and they really want to work here. They left before 4 years. They never made that 4-year mark because they couldn't find housing. So it's a really difficult position. I'm so excited about maybe like lumberyard rentals that are, if they're not APCHA managed and they're not under those that work history restriction, maybe that's a way to get newer workers living here affordably as they wait out those 4 years. When I first got here, I bid 2 months after I got here on a rental. You had to say like, so it was like August 2015. And I said, I've been here since June 2015. And the guy above me has been here working since 1978. So I can't compete with someone who's been working longer than I've been alive. You know, it was definitely felt pretty restricted. And I think that is worth a conversation. Those are some of my thoughts right now. Thank you.
Thanks, Allison. Skippy, did you have a?
I was just going to respond to Francie, which is, Francie, I mean, the real answer to that is the real work there is at the council table more than anywhere, because we have to just create more rental housing. Short of that, there's really not a great answer. And if we had parity between housing and employment, you know, it would make sense to have maybe more parity of opportunity. But in a situation where we are housing, or we have access to way less employees than we need, it really doesn't make any sense to take someone who's been here for 8 years, has a steady job, is committed to the place, and have them lose to someone who really loves Aspen and is new, but is moving here, knowing that 50% of people who move here, no matter how much they love it, end up leaving because of cost of living. So the only real answer is we need more rental housing. I do have thoughts on all this, but I didn't know if staff was done with their presentation, so I can do it now or after.
I have one more table, but Rachel's has her hand up. She's top on my screen. So if it's okay with Carson, I'd love to hear Rachel's question.
Yeah, thank you. I don't know if it's a question or a comment, though, Bethany, so I didn't want to screw up your sequencing. I can understand, especially since you've gone into it, the complexity of changing the machine and the machinations of the lottery with home track and the audits and things like that. That's enough to really give me some pause. I was interested, and I am still bringing it forward from citizen comments to me about how people feel when they've not been able to obtain housing after 20 years, and they say, why don't I get more chances? I think Allison has made an excellent point that more chances should be a limitation, that if you're not already owning a house, you don't get more chances. But you know, it is lived or worked in Pitkin County. So a lot of people earn their way into the 4-year program living in Carbondale or commuting. And I don't mean to say that that's great or anything, but I'm just saying that's part of how people get in. And I really have to say, what we're experiencing now is a lot of people who had housing who lost it. So when you're someone who's been here 8 or 10 years and now your home was just converted to a short-term rental or was sold and demolished, or your rent just went up 300%. And we say, well, you have to leave because we're going to rent to the new people who just came to town 3 weeks ago, and they're going to give their energy to this town. That gets really hard, especially on those employers who've spent a lot of money training those people and who don't want to retrain someone new every 6 months. So there has been the commitment to the town, and I'll agree with the current standard, but I'll tell you what, in years past, people wanted it to move up to 8 years to get in or 10 years to get in. And I'm sure you've heard those comments as well, Bethany, that it's just not fair to people who've been here so long to be competing against the newcomers, you know? So these things aren't easy. There's always someone on the other side of the line whenever you draw it. I do like the concept that Allison talked about trade down or exchange, but that would be fairly complicated between taxes and lotteries and, you know, making sure people aren't putting a little boot in on the side to get the deal done and things like that. But as I say, if there was any chance for one more chance for people who've been here over 20 years, I would appreciate it. I'm not going to push it too hard. And I do think you'd have to put the caveat on it that they had not already been owning an APCHA unit. But, you know, for anybody, a renter, whether they've been here 3 years or 6 years or 12 years, everybody wants to start developing security. They want to start developing equity. They don't want to be having to move out because it's a renovation of the complex or whatever it is. And so, you know, we just have, as has been said, tremendous demand and unlimited resources, very limited resources. Skippy's absolutely right about, you know, we need more revenues coming in. And so I don't want to say rental housing all sits at the city council table. I'd like to put some of that rental housing on the Board of County Commissioner table and ask them to start considering a revenue source that is beyond mitigation for new growth that doesn't even keep up with itself. And, you know, part of the lumberyard, Allison, is if we have other partners who come in there and they aren't under APCHA, it's very likely going to be by a given ownership group. And it will only be employees of that ownership group or that investor group and not general employees who can apply whether they've been here 4 years or 10 years, you know? So, you know, it's going to be like people who put the money in are going to get to control the units and the type of employees that they want to have there. I would love to see far more money from multiple partners or municipalities or counties into making the lumberyard happen. And, you know, what was it, Skippy? The best we're going to see is maybe 2028, 2030.
I'm more hopeful than that.
Yeah, maybe a little more hopeful on that. So let's not go crazy about where there's going to be new rental housing coming forward anytime soon. All told, the last thing on the comment is I appreciate Carson's comment about how about more chances for downsizing. But I think we need to really look at the bigger picture of downsizing, which I've done before, but not recently. A lot of the issue has to do with price. Can someone really move down with the assets that they have, or are they kind of landlocked in their current house because all the new category whatevers, 1 bedrooms are more than they're going to pull out of their old place, and new loans and the problem of moving. And, you know, so I think there's a lot of other factors other than winning a lottery that are keeping people from jumping in to downsize. And that's where I'd like to spend some more time on it to say, what are the other factors we can pull in that that will make it something people want to do. And again, I'm not wanting to keep assigning research projects, but perhaps Cindy could tell us, or Pam, from the resales that have been happening, how often are they seeing people entering lotteries to buy smaller units now? I mean, are we giving extra chances to 3 people who are trying, or to 0 people who are trying, or to 25 people who are trying to downsize? I don't know, but it'd be a great question to ask and start, you know, tracking our trends and finding out what would really make people downsize. But in the past, it's been a mismatch of desires and equity and perhaps location or unit type. If you're at a point where you don't want to go up 3 flights of steps, you're not going to want to buy that studio at Hunter Creek. You know, if you're at that point in your life where you want to be on the ground floor, those are the only units you would even consider moving into. But I think that what is being identified here is really important, and I would certainly consider it, is to have a set aside of some amount of the rental units that would be available, that you would say, hey, these are newcomer properties. You know, how do you do that so it's not the entire inventory, but there would be some, just as we should probably say some of the housing dollars should create senior housing opportunities for seniors to move out of their units. I mean, the real downsizing issue is there's no place ever, there's never been a dime put into it other than the actual senior center and the assisted living in terms of housing, because it comes out of production for new units for new workers. But if we all allocate something towards a senior community where people would want to move, we could open up some units. Thank you very much for listening.
Okay.
Thanks, Rachel.
Thanks, and I just wanted to let the record reflect that Kelly has joined. Hi, Kelly. Go ahead, Bethany.
Okay, I'm going to scroll on to the last table. Rachel, I heard all of your comments and everyone else's, and I'll touch on them after. So Maddie, I think you're controlling. If you can go to table 3, that would be awesome. So as we get to table 3, I'm going to start talking about it. And then what we did is listened to the folks that were looking, Rachel and whatnot, looking for someone to provide more chances with a longer work history. What we did is we looked at adding a bracket for more than 20, less than 24, more than 24, less than 28, more than 28, less than 32, and then more than 32. We picked a random number to stop at, and we did the 4-year kind of whatnot. Since you all can't see it, I'm going to talk you through it a little bit. And oh, here we go. So what this looks like is it certainly gives those with our current chances. So the 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and you know, if we were to add a 10, 11, and 12, it would give the 10 and 11, 12 a higher chance of winning and reduce everyone else slightly. They're not big percentage jumps. Again, this is based on this specific lottery. It might be different if we had more folks weighted heavily in the higher ranges of years worked in Pitkin County. And then the other thing we did at the far right side is we said, okay, what if we went to 1 to 8? And so we looked at those. We looked at those numbers too. That is where you'll see the biggest jump in this current lottery. For example, someone with more than 32 years had a almost 7 3/4 chance of, you know, an increased winning by just changing it from 8 chances to 9 from the perspective of dropping that lowest category to 1. So this is another approach. And so what we've tried to do, as Cindy mentioned, is really provide several different options if the board is interested in continuing the conversation, and we can take one of these and, you know, create 3 or 4 more lotteries with a mismatch of people so that you can see the difference in percentage. I think Allison has a fair point too, that, you know, is for the correct starting year. That's up to the board to decide. But this is what we have presented in response to your request to see some changes with the lottery. As far as kind of right sizing and downsizing and providing, whether it's a super priority or a social swap situation, I think the things that we look forward to talking with you all over the next couple board meetings when we start bringing right sizing is the tricky things that Rachel, I think you were alluding to. Is it a category? Can they downsize into a category of what they purchased, or is it their current category, which might be very different? What is the purchase price? If they're now a category 4, but they're a category 1, when they first bought into the program, what does that look like from a mortgage? So I think there's lots of detailed questions, and it's going to be a robust conversation when we get there to figure out what that looks like, or is it giving more chances, as Carson said, into the mix? And so I look forward to that discussion sort of occurring, whether it's concurrently to this or in the future. This was really looking at, do we want to give folks more chances if they've worked longer? Was the board still interested in providing those additional chances? So with that, I'm done presenting, and I'm happy, Carson, to turn it back over to you and take some feedback and kind of end up with staff direction on where we should go with this, or we can put this on pause until the right sizing conversation has occurred a bit more too.
Yeah, I mean, I will say, I mean, I don't know that we need to adjust the chances on this, and I'm not. I mean, if anybody has strong feelings otherwise, let me know. I mean, that's not what I'm hearing. I mean, I think for me, more as I said at the outset, is really that focus on, if somebody does want to downsize to a smaller unit, we should absolutely make that as easy as we can, assuming they qualify, right? There's other considerations, as you just laid out, as Rachel has laid out. There are a ton of, I mean, this is a very deep conversation. I guess for me, one thing I would be interested in is, I mean, have you, or Bethany or Cindy, have you ever had anybody come in and say, I'm in a 3-bedroom and I want to go to a 1-bedroom? Has that ever happened?
I haven't heard it. Cindy might have, but
We had one household that did it, but it was more financial. If they could financially have kept their 3-bedroom, they probably would have.
Got it. Okay. Well, I look forward to that discussion. I think that's an important one, and that's that'll be a good one for us to tackle. And having Rachel, you've been through it before, certainly, right? Look forward to your perspective of what the discussions have been previously, and hopefully we can get an update and save some or all benefit from those previous discussions. So,
you know, it's not that I have the questions sorted out or anything, but I really think that perhaps surveying and just literally asking for input from people who we know through the records are over 65 or 70 or whatever, and ask them, you know, what is the roadblock? Is it just that you've never won a lottery? Is it that you're renting your other rooms and they actually provide income and you are, you know, you're happy with that? But what is it? Would you move if you could have something on the first floor? But I don't know that we've reached out and asked people, and so we're all kind of making our own assumptions. But I do think that financial barriers and reality, and the older you get, the more you don't want to have a new mortgage, you know? And so how do you get people in it where their cost of living will also decrease as their unit size decreases? It is going to be just a pivotal point for people.
Yep.
Thank you.
Great point. Kelly?
Thanks, and I'm sorry I'm coming to this discussion late, so I don't know if I'm going to hit things that have already been said or concerns raised. On this latter point, I will say Matthew and I attended the senior council meeting today. If you already updated on this, Matthew, let me know. Okay. At their invitation, you know, they had some questions. There's some data points they need that I'll forward to staff once I get those specific questions delineated. But, you know, they just also are interested in the right sizing conversation, and they want to be partners in that conversation. And, you know, they are nervous, I would say, that APCHA is going to come up with some, you know, rules that rather than incentives. And, you know, and I assured them that this board, one of the values of this board is compassion, and that, we're looking to improve our communication as a board. And then also, committed to them that I would come back to this board and say that once we have identified a time for that conversation and are ready to begin brainstorming, that we invite them to have a joint meeting with us to do that. And to really hear from them. And maybe we do some advanced planning where we come up with some questions or some ideas that we want to workshop and send that out to them to be able to work through the senior population and bring some real input to us on what could motivate them. What would motivate people to downsize and start to really flesh out what that looks like. So I hope this board can commit to that invitation to them. And I think it would really, behoove us to figure out what opportunities they would see. And then also, I just want to flag, one of the things that I think Rachel has brought up in the past is thinking about in terms of the, downsizing and the retiring population. The asset caps might be something that we need to look at when we're thinking about this as well, because people are going to have the most amount of assets that they may have right as they're reaching retirement. And we wouldn't want that to necessarily be a penalty towards them for trying to downsize. So I think we should just flag that as one issue to work through as well. And then I will say on the number of bids, I guess the only thing I do think that there is a fairness thing to letting people's chances go up, but maybe this is a bell curve, because then are we kind of giving more chances for people to get into our inventory that we're then trying to move them into a different part of the inventory? Right. So if you're looking at 32 years, I think you're going to be looking at retirement pretty soon. So are we giving people more chances to get into APCHA's ownership inventory while we're also trying to figure out a program to maybe get them into the right place? So if there's ways to synergize that, I think we should find them.
Thanks, Kelly. And John has joined.
Sorry, I'm late, guys. Financing housing down valley. I apologize.
And I was on a short-term rental.
It will. I was thinking that this will not be short-term rentals. It is attainable housing.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think we've. Anyone have anything else on the number of chances discussion, Allison? Skippy?
Yeah, I was gonna say this in comments, but I think it's relevant here. I just want to make sure we're not just saying downsizing and saying that's just someone who is a senior who is no longer working and moving to a different place in our community. I think right sizing, I really like that term more. Families get divorced, one kid goes off, their one kid goes off to college and they don't need a 3-bedroom, they never had that used for that 3rd bedroom. Or there's all kinds of reasons someone might want to offer their place or find a better fit. And I think just remembering that while we work on an incentive program, instead of just categorizing one specific user who might be interested in that program, so that we're really taking all the right pieces and making them fit instead of one specific piece and trying to make it go here when other people would have played the same game. I think everything else can be reserved for comments. Thank you.
Excellent point. Skippy?
Yeah, I'm supportive of staff's recommendation not to change anything. Looking at the math of this, the biggest changes are actually affecting the relative chance of winning between people who are in the existing strata. I mean, if you go from 5 to 6 to 1 to 2, I know it gets confusing in the math here, but you're talking about a 20% reduction in chance of winning to 100% reduction in chance of winning between an 8 and a 4-year person. And I don't think that was never our goal or what we were trying to solve for. So I don't want to play in that sandbox at all. I feel for people who have been here longer. And there's part of me that wants to give them that extra carrot just for their service to our community. And as someone who's, I think approaching your record, Carson, I feel for it myself, but knowing that it's going to take a lot of work and heavy lifting on the back end, I just don't think logically we can say it's worth it, because the truth is, if you've been here longer or you've bid more, you've already gotten an advantage in that you've bid more times. So it may not have converted for you, but strictly speaking, you have been given an advantage over someone who has bid less mathematically already. And it is sort of built in. So, given all that, I don't think I can support changes at this time. I'm really happy to hear, Rachel, you talking about senior housing. I love that you were at the senior center today, Kelly. I think that's dead on. I think we need to be engaging that community in an open-hearted way soon. And I think the opportunity for lottery changes is in the right sizing conversation, where maybe like in complex, there's a special class where you really jump the line. Although to your point, it's not just that, it will take incentives. But we want to do that. And Rachel hit it on the head. I mean, we've got between 330 and 679 empty bedrooms. We have 330 conversations where we know who to talk to, and just not going in saying, what can we do to get you to move, but just what's your circumstance? What's going on for you in your life? And is there a situation that would be preferable? Because for the community, it'd be preferable to fill that bedroom. And if there's a win-win, then we can figure that out. So I think that's the better next step, and I look forward to that.
Thanks, Skippy. Well, I'm hearing consistency across the board, so I don't think we need to beat a dead horse. So with that, let's move along to Board of Directors comments. And I'll just start at the top of my screen. Rachel. You're on mute.
Yeah. See it right there. The little red line means something. Thank you so much. I really have no great comments tonight. I am in Denver for the legislative session. I'll see what they're doing in terms of talking about housing programs, but I frankly think Kelly is a little more up to speed on all that now with all her statewide work. And I want to thank you for meeting with the senior group today. Really, really appreciate it.
Agreed. Kelly.
I'm not sure I have a ton of detailed updates right now on the housing front. There is, I'm happy to, and I'll share around recommendations that came from the interim committee on affordable housing about how to spend the 400 million American Rescue Plan funds that came to the state of Colorado from that bill, and the recommendations that they've made to the legislature, if that's of anybody's interest. Yeah, we'll be working on all that kind of stuff.
Thanks. Allison?
I want to play matchmaker here a little bit and say, Rachel, I also support that idea of some surveying with our senior population. And if you guys just got in touch with the senior council who wants to make sure they are heard, I wonder if they can be the ones who steward that survey and take a little bit of staff work off APCHA. That would be a great little partnership to get that conversation going. I'm also happy to attend. I think I was off the meeting by the time this came up, probably last time, but and meet with the Woody Creek. So as those conversations go, if we schedule a time to go out and meet with them, I'm happy to be representing there as well. Cindy, are these our first these four that just closed bids today? Are those going to be our first four using the new home truck lottery?
No, we've done 2 or 3 lotteries already on home truck.
Seamlessly, lovely results. Yep. Okay, great. The one thing I thought about, sorry, I know this is the previous discussion, someone who's just bid over and over and over again, especially a year like the last couple where there's more opportunities than usual. Maybe you get like your 15th bid free. Right now you have to throw in $5, $10, $15 to get your name in. So there is an actual cost to continuing, if you have that in, but I don't think you should be rewarded for just having bad luck and making that have other people's luck get even worse. So that was my one final suggestion.
Thanks. John.
Well, I was just thinking about Carson and Mr. Bad Luck, but
yeah, I ended up with a fabulous place.
Well, it all works out in the end, but
it only took 31 tries.
This is the best board meeting ever if I just show up right before director's comments. But I was in a meeting with my developer, and he brought 42 units online in the last 3 months in the end of December and November, fully leased up on housing in front of the city market in Carbondale. We were talking about his project in Basalt, 64 units, 2 buildings are halfway built. But housing is critical, and finding that attainable affording. This is truly not short-term rentals. He plans to rent it long-term, but it's amazing the demand that he had on this project, because you would have never penciled it out. It would lease up as fast as it has, and it will continue to lease up, in Basalt for sure. But so I was working on housing, so I apologize for being late, but this is the best. This is a good board meeting if I can get in and get out. So thank you.
Perfect. Francie. You're on mute.
You're on mute.
I did want to ask John a question. I don't have comments, but I just read in the paper, in the article about Carbondale discussions on STRs, that those apartments by City Market are renting for $3,000. Is that right?
Yeah, up to 3,000 for some of the bigger ones, but yeah, it was between 2 and 3. They're big numbers for sure, but that's what the market bears. If you go further down Valley, we did the Buffalo Valley project that fully leased up very quickly. I think that was 64 units, and that was in a whole different market of need, but that was $2,000 a month plus on those units as well.
And 20% of those are affordable housing?
Yeah, and each housing authority, Basalt the same way, has their limits, their rental limits. But yeah, I think there's 4 units in the first building that Briston had to lease up to, had to be rent restricted.
And is that a lottery
That was
system?
part of their approvals.
Is that a lottery system also?
I don't know how that gets leased up. That's a good question.
I'll ask Dan. Thank you.
John, do you know, are they starting to say that the Basalt affordable housing units have to be workers in Basalt only, and Carbondale have to be Carbondale worker only? I mean,
the deed restriction for the units at Stotts Mill that we're financing, it doesn't specifically state that. I don't know if Basalt decides to do that they have to be Basalt workers only. Right now, and their rental limits and their income limits are actually higher than what our rates are here in APCHA for those units, but Basalt set their limits. So,
thank you,
Skippy.
Grazie. Welcome, John. Just a little PSA. As you guys know, we're in a moratorium for residential development in Aspen, and we're starting to get into the meat of it. So council just scoped out everything that's going to happen there. That'll come back and get finalized in the very near future, and then the real work begins. And I just think there's a misconception, not amongst all, but amongst some, that the moratorium is the thing that happened, and it's not. The moratorium doesn't do anything. It's the process by which we decide the things that happen. There's a recognition that we hear from everybody that the totality of our land use code is delivering the opposite of what we say we want as a community. That's our fault as government. That's not anyone else's fault. And so this is the process where we realign that so that the land use code delivers the things that we say we want. And that's going to be a very inclusive process. So if there's anyone you're talking to who has thoughts about it, whether they think it's the dumbest thing that's ever been done, the best thing that's ever been done, owns an STR, is a developer, just has ideas on housing or environment, we want everyone at the table for the next 5 months so we can come away with a resulting land use code that actually delivers the things that we say. So just send people our way, or you can send them to me particular, and I'll put them in with staff in the right place. But we really want everyone to be in the process and part of it.
Thank you, Skippy. And I have nothing to add. So with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I will make a motion to adjourn.
Motion from Rachel to adjourn. Second from
Yeah, sure.
Allison. Great. And it's a roll call vote.
Okay, Rachel,
Yes.
John,
Aye.
Allison,
Yes.
Carson,
Yes.
Kelly.
Yes. Sorry to miss the beginning.
Yeah. Thank you all and have a good rest of the week.
Bye,
Thank you.
everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Hi, everyone.
Recording stopped.